Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Daniel. We're in Daniel chapter 1. Yesterday we saw that Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, had been taken to Babylon to be trained for service in the Babylonian Empire. This provided the occasion of their first testing. Would they be faithful to the God of Israel, or would they compromise their faith in order to get along in the land of Babylon? Notice in verse 5 of chapter 1 it says, "Now the king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were enter the king's service." So this training was to take 3 years to prepare them for service in the Babylonian bureaucracy, serve the empire. But it provided the first test. What would Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego do? We're told in verse 8, "But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and the wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way." Daniel, and we can be sure Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego agreed, they had determined they would not defile themselves. They would not compromise their faith. Some of the food given from the king's provisions, of course, would have been forbidden by the dietary laws of the Old Testament. Also, many of the customs and culture of Babylonian would cause them to compromise their faith, and they determined they would not do it. Now, Daniel went to the chief official in charge of the training and said, "We don't want to defile ourselves in this way. Give us permission not to partake of this food and eat only vegetables and drink only water." Now, the official, though he favored Daniel by the providence of God, was not willing to do this, but said, "Listen, if you look worse than the other trainees, I will receive the punishment of the king." And Daniel said, "Well, let's have a test. Let us go 10 days, and we'll only eat," that is, myself, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, "we'll only eat vegetables, we'll only drink water. And if after 10 days we don't look better than the other trainees, then do with us as you will." The official agreed to the test. And after 10 days, they looked better, physically more fit than those who were eating all the things the king provided, all the foods being offered. So Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were allowed to exempt themselves from those things that would compromise their faith. The first test was, will you compromise your faith to get along in Babylon? They had said no. They would be true to God, and God honored them and blessed them because of it. Now let's see how it all turned out. When the training was over, we discovered that to these 4 young men, that's in verse 17, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and all kinds of learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. So God blessed them and honored them and exalted them, and prepared Daniel for what was to come later in the book. Now, at the end of the time set by the king, that's the end of the 3 years, the chief official presented them all to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found no one was equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the service of the king. In every matter of wisdom, in every matter of understanding, about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and all the enchanters in the entire kingdom. So God exalted them in their place, established them in the administration of Babylon so that he could use them as his faithful witness. So here we have Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're in Babylon. They're in the service of the king, but they're faithful to God. This is the introduction to the book. And this sets the scene for what is to follow all through the book, as they will time and time again see God's mighty hand to rescue them, as they will time and time again show how faithful they are to the God of Israel, and as God will give Daniel the ability to interpret dreams and visions, which will show his plan for the future, which will show that God is in control of world history, and in the end, his kingdom will prevail. All that's going to be shown in the rest of Daniel, and it's all ready now. God has set the stage by putting Daniel and his friends in a place where they can have influence and they can be faithful and give testimony to the God of Israel, the true God. Hope you join us next time as we continue our 5-minute Bible study in the book of Daniel.